Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing an overview of the 2021 box office, talking specifically about the biggest losers at the box office this year. This is looking at all of the films that have been released so far in 2021 as of the day I'm recording this, which is December 23rd. So obviously some of these numbers will likely have changed, especially looking at Spider-Man No Way Home having probably one of the biggest changes on this list, and it'll have been changed because of the fact that it is the 23rd of December. And this is being put out on Christmas Day. So again, I'm pre-recording certain videos because I have family coming in town and don't want to have to bother anyone in recording videos. I will, of course, release random videos maybe every now and then if I have time, if there's any major news that does break. But this has been a video that I have been promising for a while, and so I wanted to make sure to get it out there. So before going any further into the biggest financial losers studio-wise of 2021, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So for this, I decided to use Google Sheets and to go directly there. I know that people have been much more fond of the Excel sheet that I have on my website for box office tracking because it just works a little bit better. The issue I have is that the online version has limitations and I'm no longer able to add any new rows because it's too large of a file. So I might just have to go back to using Google Sheets, or at the very least have the Sheets version, have the complete box office since I started doing tracking this way, and then only have the newer releases in the Excel sheet. And I will, of course, let y'all know whenever I decide on that. But today, we're going to be going into what are the biggest losses as far as the studios are concerned for 2021. We'll be doing a breakdown of the biggest financial losers as far as individual titles and films are concerned, though that one I do want to wait until the end of the year to actually look at those numbers because there are new films like The Matrix Resurrections, which we do not have an official budget yet for, and also it just came out, and so there might be some more money to be had there. And there's other films as well that are still in the process of making some money. These are all numbers that are being based off of either thenumbers.com or Box Office Mojo. In certain cases, I went with whatever was the highest number that was available on the site, trying to give as much grace to a movie at any specific time, and by extension to any studio at any specific time as well. And so let's go ahead and get started with the biggest loser as far as studios box office is concerned. And you're going to be surprised to know that it's not Disney. In fact, it is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers had the worst box office showing of 2021. So this is not even going back to, to pre-pandemic times. This is looking at specifically films that got released this year. And as you can see, out of all of the films that they released, only 2 ended up actually breaking even and making any profit. And they've had several films come out that have had some massive losses. Now, I will put one caveat to Warner Brothers, and that is we do not know how much money they actually received from HBO Max during the year 2021. I, of course, will do another video breakdown of what the actual financial losses in general, when you take into account some of these other factors like HBO Max are concerned. I want to say someone at one point said that it's multiple millions of dollars that they're making every single month. I think I had at one point heard a rumor that they're making almost $1 billion a month. Again, I think that might be a little bit on the high end of things, but with all that being said, this is something that could be a factor as far as whether Warner Brothers as a studio, again, as the giant corporation that owns Warner Brothers, AT&T, whether or not they actually saw losses from all of their films because of the HBO Max factor. But when it comes to the box office, there is no doubt, there is no question about it. It had the biggest financial loss of all studios, losing a whopping $888 million. $888 million. That is a pretty insane amount of money to lose. The total cost of all of their films for this calendar year was around $2 billion, so a little over $2 billion. The entire box office they received this year was around $1.8 billion, and when you take into account, they only get about 60% of the box office numbers, and then you, of course, have to subtract that which they spent on the film. You end up with them at a negative or at a net loss with $888 million in financial losses. As of right now, one of their biggest losers is The Suicide Squad. I know that a lot of people were fans of that film. I myself was not, so it's not that surprising of me to see that film here on this list. Matrix Resurrections obviously just came out, so this number will change over time, but could also be up there as some of their biggest financial losses. Space Jam 2 was also a $100+ million loser for the company and has added, of course, a lot to the biggest box office studio bust of the year. Coming in at number 2, as many I think expected to come in at number 1, is Disney. Disney, of course, coming in with right now, when you don't account for Spider-Man, $439 million in net losses. And you might be wondering, hey, there's some films on here that I thought were associated with Disney, and that is true. Those are the 20th Century Studios releases, and those are not on the list because they have been in the process of being made since prior to the pandemic, and also therefore prior to the 20th Century Fox deal. And so because of us not really knowing how much of a loss those films would really be for Disney, they're in a separate category because of that reason, because we don't really know, again, if the money's already spent and then you buy the company that spent the money. Does it really impact you? I would say no, and so those films are not on here. So you have films like Encanto with $72 million in financial losses, Jungle Cruise being the biggest of the bunch with $173 million in net loss, and then you have, of course, Shang-Chi, which was the only film they had put out this year that actually was able to make anything at the box office as far as net gain with $34.3 million, but their entire financial loss is $439.6 million. Remember, this is also not taking into account how much money they're getting from Disney Plus, but based on recent reporting, we do know that Disney Plus is not doing as well as they had anticipated. The numbers are not reaching the goals that they had in mind. They spent a whopping $1.6 billion on their films this year and only received $1.9 billion in total box office returns, reminding ourselves they get 60% of the box office, and then you subtract the total cost. That is what leads to this loss, this net loss of $439.6 million. Now, with Spider-Man No Way Home, that is a Sony product. However, Marvel did contribute 25% to the overall funding of the film, and therefore receive 25% of the actual gains and profits of the film. So with that in mind, the total box office right now for Spider-Man is $779 million as of the time of recording this video. The total budget of the film was $200 million, meaning that Disney's total cost, when you add in marketing, etc., was $75 million. So they only put up $75 million for the overall product of the film. Their cut, therefore, right now is at $41.8 million, which leads their offset to still a financial loss of $397 million. So they have to make a crap ton of money from this movie for them to get to any point of being able to make anything up at the box office. And now looking at the number and looking at how little they get return on the investment as far as, Spider-Man No Way Home is concerned, as far as the box office is concerned, some people might try to bring up things, what about toys and merchandising? They've got complete control of that, and that is true, and there's a lot of money to be had there, but that is not box office. And so as far as box office is concerned, it's looking like it's going to be another red year for Disney. This is, of course, not even including all of their losses that they had during the year 2020. The next one up on the list is 20th Century Studios, and as I said, this one's a little bit tougher to actually gauge because you have films like Free Guy, which came out earlier in the year, which was a $21 million net gain because of, again, being more successful than people thought it would be. You then also have films like West Side Story, which is right now at a $132 million loss, which is pretty amazing, and then even films like The Last Duel, also around a $132 million loss, but both of those films, even though they are under the Disney umbrella, were all a part of the 20th Century Studios brand, and therefore likely were partly funded or mostly funded by 20th Century Fox before it was actually bought out. Antlers is on here as well as a 20th Century Studios release, but we don't actually have a budget yet. It's kind of odd. It's the one film that for some reason never post a budget. Some people think that it's probably around 30 to 40 million, but it's really hard to say at this point in time. Either way, not a very good showing of the 20th Century Studios movies this year, as the total cost was $472.5. Their total box office return was $399, leading to a $242 million loss for all of those films. But as I said, who is actually losing on these movies is really hard to tell because of just what we know about the actual films and what we know about the dealings with 20th Century Fox, and really hard to say that Disney actually got any losses from this since they didn't spend their actual money on the projects necessarily. One could probably look into the amount of the money that they spent on the 20th Century Fox and on that Fox Studios deal, but in the end, it's hard to really say. The next loser up on the list is Lionsgate, which came out with $210 million in total cost for their films, making $200 million at the box office, leading to an $89.6 million loss for their films. Again, not a whole lot of good stuff coming from them this year. Wrath of Man was definitely, I think, one of the best films to come out this year. Probably was able to make up that $9 million on Blu-ray and 4Ks, which, by the way, obviously are not a part of these box office numbers, and so those can be considered. So when you have lower numbers like this for Spiral and Wrath of Man, those numbers probably could be made up. A little less certain if they could make up things like the Hitman and Wife's Bodyguard, which was a $49 million loss, or The Protege, which was a $25 million loss. In both of those cases, much lower budget films, so at least Lionsgate did not put a whole lot of money into their projects this year, but they also did not get that much return on their investment. MGM, this is interesting, of course, because we know Amazon is currently in the process of acquiring MGM. There's questions of how long that process will actually take, but right now they're looking at $74 million of loss for the year. So they totally put together $741 million in their total cost of all their films. $1.1 billion was the total return on their investment. And therefore, their actual net gain was around $74 million. Now you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, Wrath of Man is showing up twice here. And that is one of the difficulties, too, with some of these films, is some of them were co-financed by other studios. And so when we look to films like Wrath of Man, we see both of these names pop up. And so therefore, it is a little bit harder to be able to determine exactly, which studio it is having a direct impact on. Needless to say, it's not going to make much of a difference whether you add it to one category or add it to another category. In the end, though, it was, again, red letter years for both of these studios. Open Road had a couple of films come out this year. Also, not looking all that great for them either. $72 million in loss with films like Cop Shop and The Marksman. Yeah, if you're asking yourself, wait, those were movies that came out this year? Yeah, I would say the same thing. Paramount, $59.8 million loss for them with films like Clifford the Big Red Dog, Snake Eyes, Quiet Place Part 2. Obviously, their biggest loss was Snake Eyes. Again, big financial flop there. Clifford the Big Red Dog also did not do well either. However, they do have Paramount Plus, and so a question could be asked about how much money did they actually get from that? But they shelled out $358.5 million for their films this year, $497 in returns, leading to a net loss of $59 million. We then go to another financial loss for a studio this year, which I think will kind of give a little bit of a spoiler as far as the most successful studio, which I'll do in a separate video. But as far as the next least successful studio this year for 2021, we look at Universal, which saw films like House of Gucci with $70.3 million in actual financial losses, films like Respect with $63 million, Dear Evan Hansen with $31 million, In the Heights with $56 million. And obviously, the big question with Universal is going to be whether or not they are able to make this money up in any of their Blu-ray and 4K deals because of the various impacts of the box office on them. $132 million was their biggest box office success, which was Fast and Furious 9, The Fast Saga. And so, again, they were able to at least have several films that actually made profit, several films that actually were able to break even. No Time to Die, as high as that number is, still was only able to make somewhat of its money back, and this number actually should be even a little bit higher. That being said, it's not enough to be able to make this film, or rather this studio, be able to reach the point of financial viability. A24 had one film come out this year, which was The Green Knight, which has $11 million in losses. Again, Could it make it up in Blu-ray and 4K sales over time? Maybe, but it's still kind of hard to say at this point in time. And with all of that being said, those are the losers this year, and therefore there's one studio left as far as box office winners, but I'll do a separate video on that studio, as I'm sure some of you have already been able to determine this for yourselves. But what are your thoughts? Are you surprised that when we look at the overall box office for the year 2021, that you're seeing films like Warner Brothers or studios like Warner Brothers being the biggest of the box office failures? Obviously, HBO Max was probably a big part of this, and one could see and look into how much money they made from HBO Max in calendar year 2021. Might be able to make up for some of these losses, but Lord knows that no studio ever wants to see this kind of a number, or the fact that only a couple of their films even were able to break even this year on their actual sheets. And so not a very good year for them. And the same would also go for Disney, who, it's funny enough, has to rely on a Sony film in order for it to even have a prayer of somehow making up its financial losses as well. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. Obviously, there might be a couple of errors in these sheets. I tried my very best to try and get them as accurate as possible as of the day and recording of this video. And also, there are a couple of films that, again, are co-financed, and so therefore there might be some, again, questions there as well. But let me know your thoughts about it. Do you think that any of these studios will change their position? Again, Warner Brothers at number 1, Disney at number 2, and Lionsgate technically really at number 3, with 20th Century Studios kind of being in this, big question mark because of, really where does the financial liability actually go to? But are you surprised by those being the top 3 biggest losers of the year? And do you think that either of them will make it up with any of the films that are currently in release? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed Christmas, as this is released on Christmas morning. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members: animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to You Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson ×4, Mitch Dunaway, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody, Mondo Spieler, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, and Tina Bojan, and of course, the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And for my Subscribe Star members, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribestar. And to my 4 members over on Locals.com, Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, once again, Mike Jackson, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. Thank you for supporting me on Locals. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, check out the top link in the video description below. It's called Willow, or w.lo, Willow link. It'll bring you to all of my social media platforms and also to all of the various other locations that you can support the channel. You can get access to things like giveaways, where I do giveaways of 4K films, 4K steelbooks, digital codes, all kinds of stuff every single month. Also, there's a level where you get access to all of that, plus an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where you also get to ask questions that we will answer on every episode of the podcast. And at the final level, you also have the ability, the Chosen of Valhalla level, you have the ability to have all of that, plus in your first month, get a free t-shirt of your choice, any color, sent anywhere in the world, and also you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream featured on the main channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.